Good morning and welcome everybody to our annual Independence Day webinar. It's a very special moment, tomorrow being India's 75th Independence Day, and you have not disappointed. We have had over 2,000 registrations for this event, and these events are very much aligned to our company's overall mission to provide intellectual property related awareness and inspiration at scale. So to honor this special day, today our guest is Mr. Munish Sudan, Head of IP and Research Collaboration at Tata Steel. Mr. Munish Sudan, he has led Tata Steel to a number of prestigious awards, including Thomson Reuters Innovation Award, Confederation of Industry National Intellectual Property Award, Tata Innovista Awards for many years. And in 2019, he was identified as a leading IP strategist in the world by IPBC UK Media Group. So in Tata Steel, he's responsible for managing the IP ownership, licensing, confidentiality, funding, and other contractual aspects of research and technology collaborations. He's a visiting faculty in XLRI Jamshedpur, where he teaches courses on managing innovation and strategic IP management. So Mr. Sudan, he's also a licensed patent agent before the Indian Patent Office and holds a postgraduate diploma in IP law from National Academy of Legal Studies and Research. He's also a certified licensing professional and is a graduate in business management from XLRI Jamshedpur, specializing in strategy and marketing. He also has completed his master's in chemistry from IIT Roorkee. Before joining Tata Steel, Mr. Sudan worked with eValueServe as a group manager, heading a multilingual team of more than 60 members. He provided IP asset management and technology research solutions to Fortune 100 companies in energy and chemical sectors. He has managed a number of open innovation programs in order to identify potential partners and subsequently develop strategic alliances in personal care, photovoltaics, lithium-ion batteries, and other sectors. Mr. Sudan, he frequently speaks in national and international conferences in CII, WIPO, Managing Intellectual Property, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and he's himself specialist in technology scouting, technology intelligence, open innovation, patent drafting, IP licensing, and developing strategic alliances. So folks, Mr. Sudan, he's a world-renowned IP expert, and it is my honor to invite him to speak today on IPR, a cornerstone in India's journey. Mr. Munish Sudan, I welcome, really happy to have you. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rahul. I hope I'm audible to you and it's all in set. Rahul, can you confirm?
Yes, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and wish you a very, very happy Independence Day in advance. Before I talk about why innovation is imperative for India's growth, let me take you back to the annals of history to understand where were we and who are we, more importantly, and also understand what is our current state on global stage.
Sir, there's a small problem with the mic. I think it became very volume became very low.
Let me just.
It started off fine. No, it started off fine, but yeah. Yes, I think this is better. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how many of you really might have heard from your forefathers, from your grandparents, that we were called as Sone ki Chidiya. And when I was a child, I took it in a literal sense. And literally, in a literal sense, in the sense that I used to believe that maybe, we are called Sone ki Chidiya because we have a lot of gold in India. And as I grew, my understanding become better. The truth started unraveling for me, and I came to know actually it has to do with economical growth. And to many of us, it is a surprise that we were one of the richest country in the world, and not one of the richest. We were richest country in the world, and not for 1 or 2 decades. We were richest in the world for almost 1700 years. And what I'm saying, it is not a fiction, and it's not a fiction because we have documentary evidence from it. And I'm saying when documentary evidence, this documentary evidence is not from somebody who's an Indian, and just because somebody is an Indian, there's a patriotic bias attached to it or nationalistic bias attached to it. There are famous studies which are done by Professor Angus Madisons. He's a British economist who has specializations in terms of documenting the world's economy, and not only in India perspective, but across the world. And this is the figure which has taken from his studies, which tells that how India was one of the richest country. India and of course China was also one of the richest country in the world, and their share of world GDP was as high as over 25%. So the question arises, what happened? Why we become so poor on economical front? And the answer itself lies in the graph. You can very well see as India's share of world GDP declined. I don't know if you're able to see my cursor. The share of Western Europe's and United States of America started rising. And I don't need to deliberate on it. What happened? During the British era specifically, our traditional ecosystem of innovation, our traditional ecosystem of businesses were eroded significantly. That was one of the factors. And the second factor was that we didn't align well with the technological evolution which happened after the Second World War. And having said that, we don't need to deliberate that we need growth for prosperity and happiness of our nation. And as it happens, every generation has some responsibilities on their shoulders. Like our forefather ensured that we breathe in freedom, we speak our minds. Our generation also has some responsibilities. And in current state, it doesn't need to be sacrificing our life. We are living under democratic India. What we can give back is a prosperous nation, a nation happier and economically better than yesterday. And Dr. Kalam said it very beautifully. We will be remembered only if we give to our younger generation a prosperous and safe India, resulting out of economic prosperity coupled with civilization heritage. Now, if this is the crate that growth is very essential, we need to understand from where growth does come from. And I'll just touch upon very basics of economics, and we'll touch upon the three basic factors of production, what we call as a land, labor, and capital. Now, of course, you need an enterprise to convert these inputs into the output, and what we call as this output is a GDP. Now, I want to emphasize on one very, very important aspect. When we talk about land, labor, capital, these are very limited resources. It's the enterprise, it's the entrepreneurship who converts these inputs into the output. And the question arises, where does innovation fit? Innovation fit into the entrepreneurship, the fourth aspect of what we call as the factors of production. Now, how does innovation impact the growth? The innovation impacts the growth fundamentally because of the two factors. And many times, people ask me that, what does innovation does for the businesses, for the countries? If I put in very, very crude fashion, what does innovation do? It increases the productivity. What it means, for a given unit of land, labor, and the capital, the output increases. And that's the multiplication effect that innovation can produce. It increases the efficiency, it increases the productivity. And the second very, very important aspect is the new growth areas, and what we call as the creative destruction. What does innovation do? It actually systematically creates new growth opportunities where we can have new growth areas, and new growth areas give us economic impetus. And as Michael Porter rightly said, that innovation is central issue in economic prosperity. Now, well, we understand that innovation is very important, but we also need to understand where are we today when we talk about innovation, when we talk about economical progress of the country. And today, India's share in global GDP has shrunk to little over 3% in 2020. So we have come from a share of over 30% to 3%. That's our current state. And when we talk about where we stand innovation, the patents are a very, very important measure when we measure the innovation output. And we stand on number 7 in terms of patent applications for the top 10 of top 10 offices in the world. And this is the 2019 figure. Well, we do figure in the top 10, but the alarming situation which I find that the gap between number 7 and number 1 is huge, and this huge is as big as more than 1 million. We need to understand also that I showed you that the picture that where were we as a country, India and China. We were at one point of time the richest country in the world, and then there was a decline period, and we are again emerging. We are poised to become one of the leading economy in the world. But when we see us on an innovation front, we are making progress. We are among the top 10, but I think the gap that we have to fulfill is really huge. Further, we look into the other factors, technological factors which are responsible for the innovation journey, like scientific and technical manpower, scientific publication, science and technology research, graduate in science and engineering stream, the resident patent applications. We are again in top 10. Now, if we are in most of these factors, if we are among top 10, why we don't figure in top 10 when it comes to innovation index? Where is the gap? And this question actually has disturbed me a lot, and I have given a very deep thought. I've read a lot of literature across the world. I've talked to many of my friends who are in academics. I've talked to many of my friends who run their own companies. And what I find, the real gap exists that we do have capability of generating the knowledge. What we lack in terms of how to put that knowledge into use. So there's a big gap in terms of knowledge generation and knowledge absorption. And that's where we need to understand what we mean by innovation. And I don't want to give you very descriptive, jazzy, and confusing definitions of innovation. And it's very important for us to understand. And that's because most of the people, I'm pretty sure, who are attending this webinar would be from science and engineering stream, and they love formulas. They love formulas because they love to understand in a very crisp fashion. I put it, innovation is actually invention plus profit formula. It's not, innovation is not equal to invention. It's invention plus profit formula. And when we talk about profit formula, it's nothing. You need to have a business model to make invention a success. If I further simplify, innovation is equal to creativity into value. Value is very important, and if value is 0, your innovation is also 0. You might be very creative, you might have come up with something very, very great, but if it doesn't create value, it has no meaning. And if I further simplify, innovation is equal to invention into commercialization. Now, the commercialization and the value are equivalent, and I'll just try to touch upon this a little bit. Why these are equivalent? Anything which is valuable is only commercialized. And when I say commercialized, means it's used by the customers. And customers only use something which is valuable. And when I say valuable, essentially it means that benefits are more than cost. Value is equal to benefits minus cost. So essentially what I'm trying to emphasize is on that innovation is beyond knowledge generation. If that knowledge, if that novelty is not put to use, we don't become innovative. We don't have innovation. We don't have the growth. And one of the greatest innovator of 20th century, Thomas Alva Edison, put it very, very nicely. He says, anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is success. And that's something we need to keep in mind when we talk about innovation. We need to keep the value of our invention. We need to keep that value of the creativity at the forefront. If something which is getting created on novelty front, on a creative front, doesn't find value, it's not of any use. It might be a piece of paper which might be lying in the shelf. And another very, very important aspect, when we talk about innovation, many times people see it in a very, very narrow lens, very, very myopic lens, that innovation is just about technology. But innovation is a very, very wider phenomena. And when I talk about innovation, innovation is essentially about value creation. And this value creation can come from technology. This value creation can come from your offerings. This value creation can come from your customer experiences. This value can come from the way you are implementing your processes. It can come from your networking and the brand. Google is today's Google. It's not essentially because they had one of the best search engines in the world. They become one of the greatest company in the world because they innovated a new ways of capturing the value. The Dell become one of the leading suppliers or the leading company in the computers, just not because they had the best of the computers. They came up with a very, very innovative supply chain. Similarly, many of the coffee makers, they reinvented the customer experience. So when we talk about innovation, we need to understand that innovation essentially is about value creation. And when we talk about growth, we need innovation-driven entrepreneurship. We talk about 4 factors of production, in which the entrepreneurship was the 4th factor. And when we are talking about the growth, we need innovation-driven entrepreneurship. We don't need SME kind of entrepreneurship, primarily from the perspective that the innovation-driven growth has exponential growth. It has sustainable competitive edge, and it has a global impact. It's not having a regional impact. And scalability is the key differentiator when we talk about innovation-driven entrepreneurship. It might be hard to start because when we talk about innovation-driven entrepreneurship, it is primarily based upon some innovation, some differentiation, some novelty factor, which is having value to the customers. It's also important from the perspective because we need to understand that how world is evolving. And if you look at this is the graph of Standard & Poor's top 500 organization. And if you see the market value of those, it comprises, in 1975, it was almost 83% tangible and 17% intangibles. As we see over a period of time, in 2020, it comprises 90% intangibles. And when we talk about intangibles, the innovation is the key differentiator. The knowledge is the key differentiator. We are living in a knowledge-driven economy. And we need to understand more and more the world would be valued on intangibles. More and more world would be valued based upon the knowledge output. As it happens, different ages were dominated by main parameters of value. We have come from raw materials to machine. Now it's the age which is big time dominated by the intellect. Now, if we understand, and I hope I have built the case that innovation is key for us to stand again as leader on global stage, the question comes to us, can we create India of our dream? And as Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. And I have a hypothesis. I think most of the audience for today's webinar is faculty or the students. I have taken some few assumptions, and I was just trying to make this slide. I was just reading about that. More than 1 million students graduate in engineering and science stream every year. And if we can add maybe another 1 or 2 lakhs in the master's program also. And I was talking to many of my friends who are in academics, and they tell me that most of the graduates and the postgraduate programs do carry some sort of internship or the master's program or what they call as a project assignment. Now, my simple hypothesis is that if we can try 1 million projects every year with a mandate that we'll have something related to innovation, we'll not try something which is already done. We'll not reinvent the wheel. We'll target something which can create value for the society, which can create value for the country, which can result into some form of intellectual output. Even I take a very, very conservative estimation of 10%. Even the success rate of out of this 1 million is 10%. We would be making huge difference to the intellectual output, to the innovative output of this country. The 1 lakh successful innovative project in some form, either in the form of new IP, either in the form of new businesses, either in the form of new startups, the kind of impact it can make, it's unimaginable. If this is the case, let me give you a blueprint. And this blueprint is developed at a very, very words eye view perspective. It's a very, very, in a brief fashion, but of course, we can deep dive depending on the interest of the people in some, webinars later on also. First we need is a problem. The bigger problem is, better it is. Because if your problem is bigger, the bigger impact it can have. And when we talk about problem, I think, people often crib about problems. I see problem as an opportunity. And when we are talking about that, we have to make a difference on innovation front. What we need to look for, we need to look for problems around. Problems in the society, problem in the industry, problem on a global scale, problem on a national scale. And once we have a problem, what we need to do, we need to have a systematic management process. It's very important that we have a process, how we go about managing the innovation, how we go about taking the innovation to the market. And this process is very simple. It starts with ideation, goes to selection, experimentation, testing and validation, diffusion to the markets, scale up and expanding the reach. And for each of these steps that I'm talking about, intellectual property has a very, very important role to play. Now, when we talk about ideation, we need to understand what all is possible. And along with that, we also need to understand what all is done. This is very, very important. And often when I go many times for judging some contest, I see that students often claim that this is new, nobody has done it. And they make a mistake. They just do a Google search for 2-3 hours and they come up with a conclusion that there's no solution for the existing problem, or the existing solution is not what they're trying to think upon. So very, very fundamental step. When we are talking about ideation, we need to be very, very open, and we need to be open on 2 fronts. We need to understand all the possibilities, and I'll touch upon ideation step a little bit in more detail in the subsequent slides. But along with that, it's very important to understand what all is done in that particular domain to solve that particular problem. And once we have all the ideas listed on, we need to move to the selection stage. And when we are selecting, we don't need to talk about what is doable and what is not doable. We only need to think from 2 fundamental aspects. The solution that we're talking about, is it sustainable? Sustainable is another very, very important consideration in 21st century. And it will become one of the showstopper for most of the businesses. And along with sustainability, we need to also think upon that the proposed solution that we are targeting to achieve, is it a differentiated solution? And more importantly, that needs to be valuable to the customer. It doesn't need to only be new or novel, as I discussed earlier. It needs to be valuable as well. And once you have made your mind, then you need to start that this is my target now, this is where I need to reach. Then you start your process with experimentation or acquisition. You don't necessarily need to do R&D yourself. You can look for the ecosystem. You can acquire the licensing, the technology. You can license in the technology, or you can work with some academia to reach to that particular solution. And of course, you need to test it, validate in the market before you really launch in the market. That's a very, very fundamental strategic innovation process that we need to. implement. We need to identify a problem, and we need to identify a problem which can have an impact and which can have a massive impact. Now, when we talk about innovation, sometimes, people come up with very, very repetitive ideas. And why it happens? Why we don't come up with original ideas? And it also happens that ideas are also similar. And the primary reason for that is that we grow in the similar setups. We grow in the similar educational setups. We grow in the similar cultural setups. We see the similar things. Our experiences are very much similar. And Steve Jobs used to say that if we have to make the difference in the industry, we need to have people with diverse experiences. And that's where the teamwork lies. And that's where I think that academics give you a platform where you find your colleagues coming from different cultures, your colleagues coming who have grown up in different education environment, colleagues coming from different kind of a family setups. They will have different experiences, which can be very, very beneficial when we talk about ideation. And another very, very important aspect when we talk about ideation is we need to challenge the fundamental assumptions. So when I say we need to challenge fundamental assumptions, what was the fundamental assumption? That we can only win wars by violence. But Mahatma Gandhi showed a different way. He challenged that fundamental assumption that violence may not be the mean always. The war may not be always the means to get the freedom. He showed a new path. He challenged the fundamental assumptions. And if you see the greatest innovation across the world, they are built upon very basic hypotheses. They challenge the fundamental assumptions. And that's where we need to act upon. Once we have a problem, we need to list it down, and we need to understand what are the fundamental assumptions related to that particular problem. What are the fundamental assumptions related to the solution which are offered by the competition? Like, this was another fundamental assumption that the watermelons are always round in shape. And there was a problem in terms of storage and transportation of this watermelon. And somebody thought of, can we make them sphere shaped? And this particular, I call it innovation of great impact. This came from Japanese. So sometimes we need to list on the fundamental assumptions of a particular product or service, and we need to challenge those. We need to reverse those sometimes. And when we talk about ideation, more is less. And more importantly, we need to also understand, we need to have a very, very deeper understanding. We need to we need to understand what is the job that particular product or service has to do. There's a very, very good article from Professor Clayton Christian, late Professor Clayton Christian, which is Jobs to be Done. I would recommend each one of you to listen to at least his YouTube talk on jobs to be done, or read that article. It's, I think, freely available on Google. And he fundamentally discussed about this particular aspect, that customers at times may not be able to tell you what they're wanting for. Even you interview them, even you have deeper discussions, they may not be able to reveal. And that's where the role of the innovator comes. He needs to understand when customer is buying a particular product or service, he is buying that particular product because he wants that particular product to execute a job for him. And we need to get to that level of understanding. When we are starting in our innovation journey, when we are trying to have a deeper understanding of problem, we need to get to that level of understanding that we understand that product or service that we are trying to propose, what job that particular product or service is going to do for my customers. And it's also very important that we strive for creating differentiation, because that's going to make your business sustainable. Otherwise, you will become another commodity player. And when we talk about starting the innovation journey, as Einstein mentioned, the planning is very, very important. And when we talk about planning planning leads to conviction. And if we see the greatest innovators across the world, they have one fundamental characteristics. They had very, very strong conviction. When Thomas J. Watson, chairman of IBM in 1943, said that I think there is a world market for about 5 computers, then Kane Olsen, who was president and founder of DEC, said that there's no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home. But there was a fundamentally very, very strong conviction from a person called Bill Gates, a computer on very desk and in every home. From where this conviction comes from? This conviction comes from strong understanding about the problems. We need to have a deep understanding, and we need to imagine the future that we are going to create because of solving that particular problem. So it's very, very important when we start our innovation journey, we understand the current state. We understand the problem in deep, we make observation, we understand the root causes with the problem, and we also understand the fundamental assumptions associated with that problem. And more importantly, we also understand what are the current solutions. And then we need to move to the second part, that what are the jobs to be done by those proposed products and services. And when we are targeting jobs to be done, the solutions that we must propose should be differentiable. And that's where the innovation comes. That's where the intellectual property comes, because those two factors make it sustainable, make it stand apart from the commodity market. That gives you the edge in the market. And for you, that your product and services don't become commodity, one-time innovation is not important. You need to keep on innovating. You need to keep on giving surprises to your customers. Give me 2 minutes. And when we're talking about innovation, it's very important that we inculcate some of the characteristics that innovators do have. And there are a lot of studies done among, there's people who have studied innovators across different jurisdictions, and they have found that, innovators have few common characteristics. And there's a very good book, Innovators DNA, and this book lists some of these factors. And one of these factors is that innovators have capability to associate unrelated things. They have ability of questioning, and not only questioning, they have ability to question in a very, very systematic way, so that they get new insights every time they ask question. And third is very important, they have high knack of making observations and doing experimentation. And more importantly, they are very, very collaborative in nature. I was listening a story about Thomas Alva Edison, and this was later to do with the collaborations. And the person who was narrating the story, he told that once Edison came to know about a person. He read some technical paper and came to know about that person, and he wanted to work with that person. So he called that person in his office, and that person was not ready to move to Edison's company. He said that he's happy with his work, and Edison went on to acquire that company because he wanted to collaborate with that person. So you can understand that if you think that a particular person, a particular startup, a particular community can add value to the work that you're doing, you need to know how to collaborate. That's very, very important for innovators, because we are living in a very, very complex world today. Complex in the sense that we are living in interdisciplinary domains. You won't find a single technology which doesn't have a mix of other domains. And we all have limited time. We can't keep on building the expertise in each and every domain. So the best way to move forward is that we collaborate with people who are expert in different domains and who can create value for our proposed product and services. To make a difference, definitely we need to create innovation-driven organizations which are having global impact. And having said that, when we say about this, I think we have all the resources. And And let me tell you what resources we have. In today's time, we have accessibility of information and data, which was a big concern. If I talk about, say, 2 decades back, uh, very few universities do have access to the technical information and the journals. And even this was available, you need to spend, I think, months and months. I remember when I passed out, I had to spend almost 2 3 months when I was doing my master's project to understand the whole literature in my domain of interest, because I didn't know which journal in which shelf it was located, and then I had to go through pages, get the photostat done. Now everything is accessible to you at the fingertips. So the fundamental bottleneck of accessing the knowledge is gone. In fact, I came to know that government of India has also taken some initiative in terms of having uh, one access for all the reputed journals, science and engineering journals. It's a great step because we learn from each other. More importantly, we learn from each other. The secondly, we should not reinvent the wheel, because that's where the efficiency lies. The second is we have the research ecosystem. We have academia, we have institutes, we have universities, and as I mentioned, we figure in top 10. And the third is we have conducive business environment. Businesses are looking for new opportunities. Businesses are looking for people who can help them in making the differentiated offerings. And if we combine all these three, I think we have the right recipe to move forward and take this country forward on economical progress. And it's very important to understand that the more and more the competitions, or more and more this war is going to be between the faster versus slow. It's not going to be between big versus small. That used to be the case, that the organization which had huge muscle power, they used to be the winners because of the inherent advantages. It's not going to be the game. And I am telling you, based upon the facts, that there are more than 50 companies in the world today which has revenue over $1 billion, and these companies didn't exist a decade back. You can see the kind of impact the innovation is making, and all these companies are based upon intangibles. All these companies are based upon some inherent innovation advantages. So more and more this is going to happen. We when we talk about Standard and Poor's 500 organizations market valuation, we also saw that happening. Now, if this is the case, we also need to understand that how IP act as an enabler. And that's where the fundamental question, IP for what? And often, I get an answer that IP is for competitive advantage. Of course, that answer is correct. The IP is always for competitive advantage. But how IP gives you competitive advantage? IP gives you competitive advantage because you have a differentiated solution, you have a differentiated product or service, and intellectual property is making sure that you are the only one who is able to leverage that differentiated offering. It gives you protection over that differentiated offering. It's very important. We need to understand these two very minor aspects, but very, very fundamental aspects. We need to have IP on something which is valuable. And of course, IP, when we talk about IP, of course, novelty is essential characteristics of it. But if that novelty, if that creativity is not valuable, that IP is not going to have meaning. So it's very important that we understand not only the knowledge generation part, but we also understand how to put that knowledge to use. And when we understand how to put that knowledge to use, that's where the intellectual property comes into picture. That how we are ensuring that when we are putting efforts for putting that knowledge to use, we are able to take advantage of that. And we need to understand, when we talk about problems, we come up with ideas. And ideas lead to inventions. Not all inventions are patentable, and not all inventions which are patentable leads to get adopted by the customers, or they don't become innovations. There are very few inventions which really become innovations. Now, when I say very few inventions which become innovation, what it means, those inventions get commercialized. And this is the center that I'm talking about. And when we talk about starting innovation journey, this is what we need to target. If you are able to target this, if you are able to create one differentiated offering, if you are able to create one differentiated offering and which has IP means of protection, I think the job is done. I think we have made a difference. I think we have reached to a stage where we can contribute to the economical progress of this nation. And that's what we need to target. And Mool Mantra needs to be very clear. We need to work on something which is differentiated. We need to create something which is valuable. And once we have clarity on that, once we have that, we need to deploy the intellectual property means to take benefits out of it. So it's very important that we understand where to create differentiation. And I discussed this. Where to create differentiation means where the differentiation matters and how to exploit the differentiation. We need IP helps in exploiting that differentiation, maintaining the status quo, managing the IP assets efficiently, and extending the differentiation, and keeping the IP assets aligned with the business interests. That's how you exploit that differentiation through intellectual property means. And when we are talking about intellectual property means, we also need to understand, many times people talk about this, that there are different kind of innovation that we come across. If we talk from softwares to high tech to manufacturing kind of industry, and there is typically interplay between two factors, what we call as the appropriability and the complementary assets. You need complementary assets also at times in terms of the setups, in terms of your marketing, in terms of the networking effect and all that. And when you are starting your innovation journey, you also need to understand what kind of a complementary assets that you would need to make your innovation journey successful. And when you're making that assessment, the TEAS model is very, very helpful. If these complementary assets are freely available and appropriability regimes are very, very weak, in terms of that IP enforceability is very weak, it's not the area to venture into. Because even you venture, you come up with a differentiated offering, because of the low appropriability, very soon people will come up with alternates and you won't be having any competitive edge. So you need to assess your offerings, your proposed product and services, whether appropriability regime in that particular proposed product or solution is strong enough or not. And then you need to assess it vis-a-vis with complementary assets. What kind of a complementary assets it would need in terms of to make that product reach to the customers. Many times you need very, very sophisticated distributed channel to reach your product to the masses. Of course, the digital age has made revolutionary changes, but still, when we are starting a journey, we need to assess our innovations, our proposed product and services on these metrics. These are very, very important. And when we're talking about intangible driven economy, and that's what we call as the new economy, this is driven by intangibles. The old economy was driven by tangibles. We need to understand that the four fundamental properties based upon which the intangible assets are built. And what are these? These are scalability, synergies, sunk cost, and spillovers. And first two are the positives for the intangibles. The third, fourth is we need to be considerate about these factors. I'll talk about scalability. Intangible assets such as a brand or an algorithm, I'm taking examples, are easier to scale. Why they're easier to scale? Because of their network effect. And I'll give you one example. Even you had a lot of money and you were running a taxi business, you could not become Uber. Uber has become Uber primarily because of its network effect, its intangible effect. And that's the power of intangibles. Same is with Amazon. So intangibles has this inherent advantage of networking effect, which leads to the scalability. The second very, very important aspect about intangible is the synergies. Intangible assets can be particularly valuable when they are combined. And when I say combine, it means you combine different pieces of technology, software, data, and go to market process. And that's a recipe of creating $1 billion businesses. And they become more valuable when you create more and more synergies. And third important aspect when we talk about intangible driven organizations or the company is the sunk cost. You built a building, even it's not used, it will have some value left in it. But when we talk about intangibles, when you put effort for building something which is more of an intangible in nature, if it doesn't succeed, all costs are sunk cost. Similarly, the spillovers we need to understand. You can you invent something, and after your intellectual property protection time period is over, your competition learns from it. Even competition learns much before it's over. They learn that how people have come up with the new things, and people learn from it. And that's the basic premises of intellectual property, that why exclusivity rights are given to people, because the whole idea is that people are able to disseminate the knowledge. So we need to understand that the scalability and the synergy effect are very, very powerful when we are talking about intangible driven economies. Another very, very important aspect we need to talk about is that the royalty outflow. And I picked up some figures. Of course, I don't have the comprehensive and the realistic figures available, but almost 32 MNCs listed on Bombay Stock Exchange paid a royalty of more than 7,000 crore rupees to their global parents. And this figure is only from the company which are listed. There might be companies, the foreign company, which are not listed. So we pay to their global parent for making use of the technologies. Even manufacturing is happening in India for a company XYZ. We need to pay the royalties to their parents, their mothers. So when we are talking about that, we need to become the leading economy in the world, the sustainable economy in the world. I think somewhere we need to also start talking about from make in India to invented in India, and that's the way forward for us. And if I sum up what I have been discussing, the key points that we need to keep in mind: we need to have a very, very deep understanding about the problem. We need to start with the problem, and once we identify that problem, we need to have a very deep understanding. Now, for having that deep understanding, I talked about Professor Clayton Christian's work, Jobs to be Done. I would recommend each one of you to go through that work. It's one of the marvelous work I have ever come across, to understand how you can have more from customers, how you can understand customers better and better. The second very, very important aspect is that differentiation is the key. And differentiation is going to be key for each and every businesses. The commodity business is going to be over, and it is over to an extent already, because we are living in global market. The competition is no more local. And the third very, very important aspect is we need to exploit IP to leverage differentiation. We might be able to create differentiated offerings, but if you're not exploiting IP, we won't be able to keep competition at the edge. And fourth, very, very important aspect, when we talk about innovation-driven entrepreneurship, when we talk about 4 characteristics of intellectual property, we need to know how to exploit the scalability and the synergy aspects of intangible. That's very, very important, because that will make the global companies which have impact, the global companies which can take our country to the next level. And as it happens, we Indians often see goddess Lakshmi, the god of wealth, and goddess Saraswati, what we call as a goddess of knowledge, as poles apart. However, time has come that we need to see one complementary to each other. And this mantra, Arth Kariche Vidya, creating wealth from knowledge, is key for us to take India way forward. We come from a land of Buddha, Kabir, Aryabhat, Gandhi. And if you see, most of these people had been seekers. They reinvented the way we look at life, traditions, science, technology. It may have happened that colonial rule may have curbed our seeking and exploring spirit, but we have inherent tendency of redefining the norms, discovery, and taking the world along with us in a sustainable fashion. And I would like to end my presentation with this note that, and I'm taking this quote from, I was reading this quote somewhere on the internet. I could not find who has written this quote. And this is a very, very motivating quote that, he's not the fastest animal in the jungle. Cheetah is the fastest. He is not the tallest animal in the jungle. Giraffe is the tallest. He's not the heaviest. Elephant is the heaviest. He's not the smartest. Wolf is the smartest animal in the jungle. But what makes him the king of jungle? And if you find an answer, it's only the courage. And the reason we are talking about innovation is because it matters. It drives our economy. But innovation needs courage. And why innovation needs courage? Because we don't repeat. And when we talk about innovation, we explore. And we innovate because we dare to reach unexplored territories. So with these notes, I would like to end, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. I hope we have some time left. Over to you, Rahul, if you're there.
Yes, yes. I think the questions will come. You can just select them, and yeah, we can continue as long as you would like to.
So I'm done, Rahul, with my content. I think it's very difficult to find if there are already questions there. I think you need to.
Yeah, yeah.
Number of,
yeah, you can just see the last few chats, and also there the questions will come. There's a small lag, 15 seconds. So I think that the questions will come, quite many of them. But you can see the chat, and once you say who will what you are answering, I can also highlight it.
Yeah. So I think Arnaba Chatterjee has asked this question, and it's very good question. I would say that around 80% of wealth is held by 20% of rich population. Then what would be the certain steps to be implemented by the economists to bridge this gap between the rich and poor? I see this change is already happening, and I think democratizing innovation is the key. I'll give you a couple of examples, and this is already happening. The venture capitalist ecosystem, which was not very much prevalent in India, it's coming up. The government has come up with so many schemes, which government also understand that ideal way forward is not concentrating wealth to a few individuals, but more and more we need to have that uniformity across the population. So my recipe, if I would say, is that the innovation is the key forward. And why innovation is the key to take India forward for that? Because innovation is the only which can make because innovation doesn't carry that inherent advantages of scale. Because I belong to a particular company, and that's why I can only have that inherent advantage. Even I have the knowledge and intellect, I can make that difference, and I can challenge best of the best in the world. And the companies and the startups of today's world has proven that. I'll give you example of Zerodha. It's a great innovation. The way they have democratized how you trade stocks. And I was just reading his story over internet, and I was listening to him. Is a great, and the only thing how he has made the difference is through the intellect. And we have the resources, we have the ecosystem with us, and this digital interventions has made a lot of difference. So if I think, and we need to also see from the leading economies in the world, the kind of this skewedness in terms of who's holding the wealth. It's more skewed in countries like ours, uh, but more and more innovation happens. I think more and more the people would come forward in the main league, and they'll make the huge difference. Uh, I'll just start from the big. There is a question: is it possible to have collaboration with very good but poor resource poor universities? Uh, my answer to that is, government is very, very open. You need good ideas, and I have seen this change myself many times. We we come along with universities and institutes to submit proposal to the governments many times to get funding, and I've seen this change in the government in different ministries which has come. If your idea is good and that idea can make a difference, the proposal is good, I haven't seen that proposal getting rejected or there's a dearth of funding. So the key here is that we need to be clear where we want to go and how we want to go. What is our way forward? And I've given a very basic framework. The need is that we develop this framework whenever we are coming to start an innovation journey. There's a question: can we say innovation and entrepreneurship are interdependent? Absolutely. I have a strong belief in that, and I think people often confuse uh, innovation-driven entrepreneurship with the SME, the small or medium enterprise entrepreneurship. And I see that difference is that when we talk about innovation driven entrepreneurship, that impact is global. The fundamental differentiating factor is that impact is global. The second is that it has a differentiation factor inbuilt in it. You can't have a global impact until you have some differentiated offerings, and that's where the innovation comes. I think, should every innovation must have a great scalability for its production and application? Uh, when I talked about scalability, actually, essentially what I means that if you're building an intangible driven organization, or if you're building an intangible, it would have inherent advantage of scalability. Whether your aspirations are there to scale it or not, that's a secondary consideration. The intangibles have inherent advantage that they can be easily scaled up. I'll give you one example. I'm a student studying in a university, and while doing my graduate internship or the project or the master's project, I come up with something, and I came up with something that's very much valuable, and I went for creating an intellectual property out of it. Now, I can start my business here in India, but at the same time, because I have an intellectual property, I can make it tradable and I can license it to somebody in Europe or United States or Korea. So what it means, I'm not interested to keep on doing business in those countries, but yes, I have inherent advantage that my business or my technology can be used there, so I can trade it there. So it has inherent advantage of scalability. That's one way of looking at. Another is the I gave you example of Uber or Amazon. They're built upon intangibles, simple algorithm. You don't need to put up the same setups and the same buildings and the same manufacturing capability every time you are launching your services in some other parts of the world. So when you are building intangibles, they have inherent advantage of scalability, and that's where I'm saying that we need to learn how to take advantages of this inherent uh, characteristics about the intangibles. That's very important. Yeah, I'll answer. There's a question on the rural entrepreneurs. Uh, First of all, I'll again start with the framework I talked about. We need to understand what are the problems. And when we talk about rural entrepreneurship, we need to have a very, very deep understanding. And that deep understanding can only happen when we live there for a certain period of time. We talk to the rural population, what kind of problems they are coming across. The thing starts with the problem. The entrepreneurship starts with the problem. If we have a clarity on the problem, and then we map that problem scale, that how big is that problem. Is that problem restricted to a particular region, geography, a particular country? Bigger, as I mentioned, the bigger the problem is, better it is for entrepreneurs. So start with understanding that problem. And once you have that problem, of course, you need to create a vision that where you want to reach. And for that, I gave you a very simple framework, the strategic innovation management process. You need to start with ideation, selection. You need to acquire, and acquire doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do R&D on your own. There are ways to do that. You can tie up with some university. You can tie up with some academics. You can license in some technology, and then start making offerings. And there are a lot of schemes for rural entrepreneurs which government of India has launched. I think better be learn about those. So that's how I would say, start with problem, have a deeper understanding about the problem. I think once you are convinced that there's a deeper problem, and that problem has a massive, that can have a massive impact, I think we'll get convinced. And once you are convinced, or once the people are convinced, I am pretty sure you don't need to motivate them enough. It's more about that, whether you are convinced with the impact a solution can bring to that particular problem or not. I think we start. Patent filing and maintaining is an expensive process. How students and poor inventors, mainly villages, can do that? How they can get? Yes, good, my pal. Good question. Let me just tell you, if you're an individual inventor or a startup, the patent filing fees and maintenance fees are very, very nominal in India. And I'm telling you, you start with that. I'm pretty sure you can just you can have few thousands of rupees, and then you can, the only fee which you might need to pay is just to hire a good patent professional to write your patent application. But government of India is still reimbursing that fees. And if you're filing the fee, if you're a startup, you need to give that certificate, and then government is reimbursing that fee. So only you need to pay. And if you're filing a foreign patent, again there are schemes where you can reimburse, I think up to 5 lakh rupees, if I'm not wrong. I can share those links with you, if you're interested. So you file the patent, and then you can reimburse that money from their schemes from various state governments and the national government. But leave that part. I'm saying even there's no money. You take that hypothetical scenario that you're putting in your pocket money of say 50,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees. 1 lakh, I assume that you need 70 to 80,000 rupees for filing a good patent application, hiring a good patent professional. I think that's the starting fee. But if you have a great invention, or if you're convinced that the solution that you're proposing has value, once you have filed the patent application, you reach out to the people who can further fund you and licensing you. Your patent becomes a kind of what you call as like you go to the bank and you have to keep something with the bank. That patent document itself is kind of a guarantee for somebody funding you. And more importantly, if you find people who are convinced with you, I think you can give license to those different customers, users, and then that's how you can make benefit. I have a number of such cases which have come, and I have found that it has worked for a number of inventors. So if you have anything something interesting and you need more details, what would be the best way of strategy? Uh, File a patent application. Once you have registered that patent application, find out who could be the prospective beneficiary of that particular invention. Reach out to those people, and if you have uh, objective of starting your own company, maybe you can offer some equity, or even you're not interested to give that equity, you can license your patent for those people, and you can create some kind of a boundaries that this is my boundary and this is your boundary, and that's how you can further fund for your future efforts. I'm getting lost that where I was. What you suggest where to file system algorithm patents? Uh, yeah, it's a bit subjective, and it depends upon a lot of factors. What that algorithm pattern we are talking about and what it solves. Algorithm as such are not patentable, but if algorithms are creating a functional effect, there's a the functional aspect attached to that particular algorithm. We can have patent on that functional aspect of that particular algorithm. Algorithm as such are not patentable. If you want to go for IP protections, the copyright is the best way forward. Again, it's a bit of subjective and it's a gray area, not only in India but across different jurisdictions. So I can better comment upon once I understand what that particular domain is, and accordingly I can suggest. But if a particular algorithm has some functional aspect attached to it, which is getting solved because of that algorithm, of course, we can go for filing a patent application. You can reach to me on my LinkedIn. I'm available on LinkedIn. Yeah. So yeah, I was looking for that word, collateral. Yes. Yeah. In some of the developed economies, uh, this is already taken as a collateral. In India also, there have been a lot of talks going on that we should encourage banks and the financing agencies to take patents as collateral, and it will come very soon. Don't worry. I'm in one of these committees uh, where we deliberate on this, where we are representing organizations and we are putting across our views to the government. So this is getting considered, where we can come up with patents being considered as a collaterals. Naveen, national, international, of course. If you think there is a market, international market, of course we need to go for international market, because we need to understand the patent rights are territorial in nature. If you haven't filed a patent application in some country, you won't have those rights. So filing in different countries depend upon 2-3 aspects. The first is, does your invention have market in those jurisdictions? The second, do you have sufficient money to file those patent applications in different countries? Third, what is your business model to extract benefits by filing patent in those countries? Do you think of starting company there? You want to license out that patents to somebody in those countries? So that's how, these are the considerations that you need to look upon. But yes, government is giving funds to reimburse your money if you have reimbursed money for filing patent application in India and abroad. If you file abroad, the amount is more. So way to get sample patent, Google patent is there, Indian Patent Office site is there, eSpace Net is there. There's a free portal, iplens.com, which gives you very good statistics free of cost. USPTO is there. There are many resources, and there are many of these resources which are available for free. Oh, so there's a question. What's her think about future economical condition? I think I'm not a. I believe that all of us can make a difference in little ways, uh, and I think innovation is the key. I'm a very firm believer in this aspect. If we can create an innovative ecosystem, I think our future is very bright. Anyhow, we are doing great, and we will come uh, much stronger. I'm pretty sure. I think this COVID times have shown that we have all the resources. There's no dearth of capability. There's no dearth of knowledge. It's that the system coming together. We have the solutions, and I don't want to give you examples what we did in this short span of time, and it essentially tells that there's no dearth of knowledge. It essentially tells there's no dearth of the technical acumen this country has. The only need is that we need to see the opportunity, and we need to see opportunity on a global front. India as such is a big market, but I think when we're talking about innovation driven entrepreneurship, we need to see the whole world as a market for us. And once we have that kind of outlook, I think there's no looking back. I Let me know if I have missed any questions. I'm sorry, because I'm able to see only the last few things. So if I have missed somebody's question, maybe you can again put it in the chat box so that I can see. Otherwise, I think Rahul, we are all set to close.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a complete privilege and honor to listen to this session. It was educative. There was like great pieces of information on innovation, and it was also like the right amount of inspiration that is it perfectly aligns with what we were hoping for. And I'm sure you've seen the comments. Everybody is writing very thankful and very informative session. So thank you so much. If you want to take any last questions, you can feel free to do it.
Yeah,
I will just take 1 minute
sure.
after this to say feedback things.
Okay. So let me just take last 2 or 3 questions which have been there. What's the tentative time for getting a patent granted? If you're a startup, time can be as less as 15 months. There's a special privilege given to the startup and individuals by Government of India. So make use of that. Typically, it takes 3 to 5 years. That's the answer to the first question. And then I've gone through the pain and actual requirement, which let me go through innovation. I have an idea and design how to go ahead. I'll suggest, Naveen, have further deep understanding. I think follow the strategic innovation management process that I have talked about. Reassess your invention, and if you are still stuck somewhere, I think you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can give my guidance. That's what I can offer for. Uh, yeah, thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It was really a pleasure having you. And I'm sure this video will be viewed like 1,000 more times, in the coming few days. So it was a great privilege to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and wish you a very happy Independence Day again. Bye bye.
So, folks, I just want to take 1 minute to tell you about the feedback form and about the certificates. So some of you might be thinking. So, of course, you need to register for the event, and the registration link is there in the description. Actually, the registration will close in like 2 minutes. So if you have not registered, I think it will not be possible anymore. And then to your registered email, we will send the feedback form. I think it will be coming to your inbox in half an hour or 1 hour time. So please, wait for it. And in the feedback form, all you have to do is fill the feedback form with the registered email address. So it will be auto-delivered to you. So please also check your spam or promotions folder in case the feedback form goes there. But you will get it in the next 1 hour or so. Okay. So I wish you a great weekend. I wish you a very, very happy 75th Independence Day tomorrow. And it was really, really great to have you in so many numbers, and looking forward to have you in future events. So goodbye and all the best.